So you want to learn how to develop a website? Great, we got your back. In this video, I will be showing you how to set up a basic NodeJS server with the additional use of EJS or embedded JavaScript to render our pages dynamically. The project is set up in a way so that you can easily use it to work on any project you want. How the project is being coded is heavily affected by my thought process. I am Rafael Delangin from Code Me Catharsis, and I will be your guide today. Before we start, don't forget that this project is available on our GitHub. All you need to do is navigate to our description and click on the repository link. The first thing we'll need to do is to set up our project. So right now, I opened an empty folder. I named it first Express Server. You may name it whatever you want, as long as it fits your goal. So we will need to open our terminal. So you can click here and then open new terminal. So the first thing we'll do type here is to type npm init. This command will allow us to initialize npm in our project. The system will give us a few options where we can modify or put input in our customized information for our project. Like for example, here is asking for a package name. You may input it whenever you may input whatever details you want, but right now I'll be skipping every information. So the next thing we'll need to do is to install the appropriate and the needed packages for our project. So for right now, we only need Express, EJS, and then .env. .env is a package wherein we can store sensitive information such as secret keys, tokens in a separate file. This file will not be hosted online, will not be pushed online. The reason for that is so that we can protect the information and then the data of our source code. To do the installation, we type in npm install express space and then EJS. This will install Express and EJS. And after this, we'll be installing the .env in a developmental version. So to do that, we type in npm again, install, and then .env with a --save and then dev. This will install the .env package in a dependency, in a development dependency. So when we're installing the project in a production environment, it will not be installing the .env package. This is because in our production environment, we will be using a different way of running our .env files. An example of which in Heroku, when we run our projects there, Heroku offers a specific part in a website in their settings area where you can manually input the sensitive information for the env files. Okay, so in here actually we will be changing the way we'll be constructing our website is through a monolithic model. A monolithic model in development is wherein everything is coded in one big software or website. In the usual development process, the front end and the back end are both separated. The front end has its own server and the back end has its own server. The way we're implementing this is one big server. So the front end and the back end are merged into one. And the way I do that is I separate all the code, all the server code and all the front end codes into their own separate folders. So I usually type in server and /server.js. Server is the folder that contains all the server files, and then the runnable file is server.js. Okay, so the next thing we'll do is, if we want to prepare this in a git environment, we will need to include a git ignore. This file will allow us to ignore specific files in our project so that it will not clutter or fill up our space. Like in this example over here, we don't need to push the files inside node modules. So to do that, we type in /node modules here. So the reason why this folder is not yet grayed out is because this project is not yet initialized as a git repository. We will do that later. So the next file we will ignore pushing is the .env file. Okay, the next step is to create the folders necessary for our structure, for our project structure. The way I do that is by creating the public folder. This folder will consist all the static files of our website. Like for example, all of our CSS files are here. All of our client-side scripts, client-side JavaScripts are here. All our images and other files that doesn't need to be dynamically created. Another folder needed is the views folder. This is where we will be storing all our EJS templates. All of our dynamically created HTML files are placed here for partials and for pages. So we have pages here, and then we also have our partials here. The pages folder consists of all our main template. Like for example, we have our landing page, we have our login page, and we have our logout page, or any kind of page you wanted. The partials page consists of single pieces of code you want to import in your pages. Like for example, over here, you may want to create a separate partial template for your footer. So whenever you want to do a change for your footer, you only need to modify one file. You don't need to modify every footer code in all of your pages file. It's like importing a specific file. So the next step is to, of course, create our server folder. So the next step we'll need to do is to create the files for it. So actually, in my coding process while developing this one, I actually create a dev.js, and then we create the server.js, and we'll also create the .env outside the folder in the root folder, and then I create also a .env copy. Okay, so the main difference between the two files is that the .env, this is the one containing all our information, our sensitive data such as secret keys and tokens, and then the .env copy contains the same variables. However, we will be omitting all the values after the equal sign. So when we push this data, the .env copy will also be included there. So when a coworker or when you clone the project in a different computer, you will get a copy of all the variables needed for your project, but you will still need to manually input all the sensitive data. So to do so, you only need to create a new .env and then copy in all the variables and then fill it out yourself. Okay, so the next step here is to code in the dev.js. So to do that, we type in require and then .env/config. This will load in the .env file we have right here, and then we require the /server.js. This will run or execute all the files, all the code inside our server.js. Oh, by the way, I forgot to install the package NodeMon. NodeMon is a package that allows us to continually restart the server whenever we do certain changes in JavaScript files. Okay, so the next step, this is how you will run the server. We type in NodeMon and then ./server and then /dev.js. Then you'll see this kind of message. It means it runs successfully. So whenever we press Ctrl S or save on our project, it will automatically restart the server. Okay, so the next part is to set up our server file. So we'll initialize here all the requirements of our project. So we will need a copy of Express from requiring the Express package, and then we will need path later on when we load in certain parts of our project, and then we will need to initialize our project. To initialize our project, we create another variable. The usual naming convention for this is app, and then we execute the app as a standard function, and then we create another function called as server, and this will be running from the HTTP package using its create server function and inputting our app value there. Now we can actually make our server run now. So we can input server.listen. This will make our server listen to our specific port, and this is the part where we will use data from our .env. Like for example, over here you type in process.env dot port. This piece of variable will load in any value in here. So in this case, it will load in port 5000. So this will specifically make our server run in port 5000. And then we'll need to add a callback to it. And then we can actually do anything we want in here. But for this case, we can actually just say server is listening on process.env.port. Okay, so whenever we run it, it will tell us that the server is successfully running on port 5000. So to test it out, we load in, we run the we put in the IP address of our local server. But the problem we have right now is that it's returning an error. This is because we haven't set up a routing for our website. Okay, so we will be doing that now. But before we can do that, we need to add a few more lines of code here to initialize our Express to use EJS and other packages and or other configurations. So for example, over here we have app set view engine. We specify our Express software to use the EJS, and then app.use. Then we tell our website to use the extended Express.json configuration, and then we tell our Express server to use the files, to consider the files in this folder as static. The ones inside the public folder are considered static, and then we set the views folder. We set in the views folder as the area where we put in our dynamically created content. So this is where path is used, so their name, then we add in this. So this will basically set up our website, and then in the next part is we will be importing our routes. So the way this the server is structured is that the routes are stored in a separate folder. So this way, our main server file is clean and only consists of a few lines of code for the setting up, and then every route we add will be stored somewhere else. Like for example, here we have app.use/. So for every / command, it goes through the we will require a non-existing file yet, so we'll be calling it routes/index. So the way this works is that we will be having an error for now. It's because the file is not yet existing. So when the website goes through this one, this is equivalent to values after the /. It will load in this endpoint. Now, what we need to do first is to create the routes folder and then an index file inside it. What I usually do is create a routes folder inside the server, and then create a index.js file in there. Okay, so inside this folder, we import Express again, and then we create another variable named router. This will be the variable telling Express where certain pieces of code go and on what endpoint should it be going to. So express.router, and then calling it as a function, and then this is where our access routes will go. So for example, here, like similar to what we have in server, we will be also importing files from here. So router.use, and then we use the / again to tell our website to use the firstmost endpoint when everything else is empty from the localhost of 5000, and we tell it to use the landing file. Now the next step is to let's finish this first. Exports is equal to router. This will finish our code. Next part is to create the landing.js file. So after running the server, it will import the index file on this folder. So when running this one, it will call the file inside landing.js. So we open this again, and then we input this code. So similar to what we have in the index.js, we import express again, just to require express, and then the next step is to create the router again, but in this case we'll be stopping the importation from here. Oops, not router. And then in here, instead of doing an import in here, router.use, we type in that route. So we're telling it that this is the prefix for it, the endpoint for it. You can actually input here parameters similar to, like for example in Facebook, wherein we have the slash profile and then slash certain or dynamically created values. So we can create our parameters there, but that's for our future video. And then we add here what kind of HTTP request this code is running. So we all have all kinds of requests that we have here: get, for example, and we have post, and we have here delete, and so on and so forth. But for now, we will only be using the get request. So we create another callback inside it. So rec res, and then you should be calling this one. So whenever this endpoint is called, we can actually specify, or actually we can run our business code in here. But in this case, we'll only be rendering our pages as slash landing. This file is actually not yet existing. So to do that, let us finish this code first. Router. Oops. Okay. So the next thing we do is to create the landing folder file, landing EJS file. So we minimize our server folder, and then we open views and then pages, and then we create our landing.ejs file here. Like for example, we can actually just input any kind of HTML file there. It's up to you what you want to input here. And let's say we'll name this landing page. Oh, I think H1 looks better. Then if we refresh this, oops, I actually named that incorrect. So going back here, it should be render, not rendering. Okay, refresh. Oops. Okay, so I made a mistake here. This one should be S, not view, but views. Okay, so going back here, we now have our landing page EJS. So to implement our partials, to make it better furthermore, so I have an example here. On our landing at EJS, let's try to make this as a more easier file to handle. So for example here, the usual HTML file has a head, and then we also have our body, and then we all know that this one is inside the body. And then actually for our partials, we can create files such as head.ejs, and then we can actually add code such as scripts.ejs. So in our head, we can specify here import such as or other characteristics of our page, such as the meta charset UTF-8, for example, and we can actually add here our style sheets, the linking for it. Like for example here we have css/styles.css. For now, this is not yet existing, but to make this existing, we only need to go to our public folder and then create another folder CSS pointing to this folder here. Then let's make another folder for our JS now. Then on our CSS file, we make these styles, the CSS, and we can decorate this whatever we want. It's up to you. I'll just leave it there as an empty file. And then on our JS file, we create another file. We will name it as app.js. It's actually up to you what you'll be naming it, but it's there for your convenience. Now the head.ejs is now set up. Now we go back to our scripts.ejs, and then we type in the code where we import scripts. Like for example over here we have type, and then the text slash JavaScript, and then we type in its source, which is /js/app.js. Okay, so going back to our landing at EJS, you can actually import these partials in your EJS files. To do that, like for example, we want to import our head. It's gonna be like this. Okay, so we have the less than, the percent, and then the minus, and then include. This is how the EJS works. We can actually have another video for this, entirely about this, and then head, something like this. This will import the EJS HTML file inside this here. It's like copying this and then pasting it here when this is being rendered. But to make our lives easier, we can actually separate this in a different file. Okay, so the next step is to import our scripts. Usually when you're doing a client-side JavaScript file, people usually import the JavaScript client-side files after everything is declared in the HTML file. In this case over here, we're adding it before the end of the body. So we have here /partials/scripts. Oops, we're naming it. Yep, scripts, and then like that. Okay, so to make sure that this one works, we'll actually put in here console log hi. Now when we run our project here, refresh, we have our default loading page, and then when we press inspect and go to console, we can see that the JavaScript file is executing perfectly. Okay, so there we go. That's how you set up your first NodeJS Express server. Now, to expand, you can actually add more routes here. You can add a specific folder. You can actually make more folders inside here. A folder dedicated for login, a folder dedicated for logout, registration, and or other kind of executions you would want. And then you can actually improve more, add more pages here, a specific file for login, logout, registration, and then another partials for, like for example, we have our head, our headers, our navigations, our footers, and or any other types of things that you need here that you only need to code once and then have it be consistent all around your website. So this is an example of your first Express Node.js basic server. Don't forget that this project is in our organization as a public repository. You may clone this for your needs, and you may initialize your projects off of this one. Do whatever you want with it. Now you know the basics of setting up a Node.js Express server with the use of EJS. Congratulations. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. If you have any questions or tutorial requests, do type a comment down below or join us on our Discord server. You may find the links of our social media channels in the video description. We'll see you and take care.